Before we start the podcast, I just want to talk to you guys about Anchor. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast, and let me explain why. First of all, it's free, so you can get it anywhere, anytime, costs no money. Second of all, there's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer, whatever device you choose. As well as that, Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can make money from your podcast too with no minimum listenership. That means a nobody podcast like mine can make money off of sponsorships. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. So if you haven't tried Anchor or you want to start a podcast and haven't tried it yet, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM to get started. What's up, guys? It's Dillo. I hope you guys enjoy this little sneak preview type thing that I do at the beginning of every podcast. I'm going to start doing now. So today, we start the thing off with Connor versus Dustin 3 talks and how they went south, but how the buddies made friends and made a deal happen anyway later on. And then we're going to get into, unfortunately, Ben Askren versus Jake Paul, because that was the talk of the town last night. But that wasn't the only event to happen. We also had UFC Fight Night, Whittaker versus Gastelum. So if you didn't want to watch a complete fucking circus happen, you had the option of watching UFC. So that was nice. But we're going to be talking about Ben Askren. And then if you want to talk about the UFC or listen to me talk about the UFC, go to near the end of the podcast. I'd say roughly around 25 minutes in, or at least 30 minutes in, and you will get the UFC talk. If you don't want to hear about Ben Askren and Jake Paul, because I know how much of a circus everybody thought it was. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Let's get into this shit.
You're listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast, hosted by Dylan Dillo Smith, Midwestern Ontario one and only MMA podcast, where we interview MMA fighters and voice actors like Sergeant Frank Woods.
What is up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Dillo's Dojo podcast. We are on episode 27, I believe, and before I begin, I missed a crucial story, I believe, last week that was actually in the process of happening. I'm glad that I did. I'm just going to be real with you folks here. I'm glad that I didn't cover the story, because the whole, it finally solved itself. There's a conclusion, so I can cover the entire story, and, people are probably going to be like, oh, what's that story? That story is obviously the Conor McGregor versus Dustin Poirier talks, the whole drama between them, and I'll get to that in a bit. But we have some things to talk about today. This episode may not exactly be a long one, may not be an hour long, but I'll be talking obviously about what I just said, the Poirier-Conor talks, the whole drama between them. And then I will get into, unfortunately, but I kind of want to talk about this because the event was just retarded, but the Jake Paul versus Ben Askren event, so I'll talk about the main event and possibly the rest of it. Beyond that, obviously, we also have me discussing the UFC card that happened last night as well, Whittaker versus Gastelum, so I'll be talking about the main card on that. And obviously might be doing some 261 predictions, because that is next week, actually. This coming week, as of recording this, because it's Sunday. So as of when this comes out, it'll be the week of. So yeah, we've got a big event coming up this week. 3 title fights. All 3 of them are well, actually, 2 of them are fire title fights. One of them I don't think should have been happening. Usman versus Masvidal, but I won't get into that. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into the first story, obviously. So, last week, near the end of last week, Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier got into a little bit of a heated argument. Now, I can't remember exactly what happened, what started it. I think it was Conor tweeted something involving him knocking out Dustin, and, or I can't remember what it was. Something about money. I think. And Dustin brought up the fact that Conor has not donated I think it was 500K, I think, to Dustin's foundation like he promised. He said he would after the fight, whether he won or lost. He said he's going to donate 500K to Dustin's charity after the fight, and that never seemed to have happened. And he pointed that out. He tweeted that out, and Conor replied, calling him a fucking hillbilly, asking if he was ripped, and just stated, like, I didn't send the money because there was no clear plan as to where that money was going, which, okay, that's understandable, but, this is Dustin Poirier. He doesn't need to steal your 500K when he's making more than that fighting you, and he's going to do it again. So why would he take 500K from you and fuck over the kids and make himself look bad? So it just didn't make any sense. Dustin kind of said that back and was saying, like, we contacted you and your people with the plan, where the money is going, what we're going to be using it for, and everything, and we still haven't heard, any answer back. It was just a complete, like, back and forth between the two. Dustin just, calling Conor out for being a greedy little bastard, and Conor, pretty much saying, fuck them kids. And it all came to this blow ahead where Conor just straight up said, fuck you, the fight's off. I'll fight someone else on July 10th, I believe is when it's scheduled. He just said, I'm gonna fucking fight somebody else. You can forget about your red panty night. And everybody was freaking out about this. Some people started stepping in and everything. Like, saying, hey, I'll fight Conor now that the spot is open. Now, we've seen this with Conor a lot. He decides, I don't know why, it's probably just a marketing tactic, but he always makes a big deal like this, and then, he vilifies himself, brings a lot of eyes to himself, makes himself look bad, and even in this case with fights, he'll say he's pulling out of the fights, or he retires, or he's done in general, and then he just comes right back, and that's exactly what happened. He said the fight was off. He said, fuck you, forget about it, find another fight. I'm fighting someone else on July 10th. And then a couple days later, I believe Monday of this week, as of recording this, it's Sunday, like I said. So Monday, he comes out and it's official. It wasn't just him who came out. The UFC came out. A bunch of MMA news outlets came out and officially announced the fight is on. Both guys have signed their papers. It's official. Essentially, no one can back out now unless, they get injured or, they give a good reason as to why. I mean, you probably could back out, but the fans wouldn't see that as a good reason. But yeah, no one can back out now. It's official. The fight is happening. And I'm so glad that I actually waited, because I would have just covered this half-cocked. I'm kind of covering it a little half-cocked now, but I would have covered this half-cocked and it would have had no conclusion. So not only would I have covered it half-cocked, but there would have been no payoff, like no conclusion, wouldn't have went anywhere, just wouldn't have been satisfying to listen to. So yeah, I'm kind of glad I waited for this one. But anyway, that's that. We almost didn't have a fight between Conor and Dustin, but we do. I'm pretty sure it was just a marketing tactic to get everybody hyped for the fight, because when they announced the fight was official, they allowed pre-sale tickets, I believe, and they sold out in seconds, apparently. Now, UFC has a tendency to over-exaggerate these things, but, that's still pretty goddamn fast, even if it was within minutes or like an hour. That's still pretty fucking fast that the entire arena sold out. So anyway, that's happening July 10th. That's going to be pretty cool. But unfortunately, I don't want to get into this, but we have to talk about Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. It was, the whole event, man, was just a complete fucking circus. And I'll get into the main event in a bit, because that itself was a complete fucking circus, more than I actually thought it would. But anyway, Ben wasn't the only MMA fighter on the card. First of all, he was the one that was, headlining the big name because he's facing off against Jake Paul. But there was actually a UFC fighter in the name of Frank Mir. Now, obviously, new people are probably not going to know who Frank Mir is, but Frank Mir is the former UFC heavyweight champion. He was an absolute legend, probably one of the best submission grapplers in the heavyweight division, in my opinion. And he was trying his hand at boxing against a guy in Steve Cunningham, who's a former champion in boxing, I believe, and just he's got like over 40, 50 fights. And he did great. He actually did great, considering that Frank Mir is not considered to be a boxer. He's kind of like Ben Askren as a wrestler, but he had better striking than Ben Askren. I'm just gonna admit that now. But yeah, he did pretty damn good and fought Steve Cunningham to a decision, so that was pretty cool. But that was the only like possibly good part of the event, was that fight. The event was more a musical concert with the most, like, the dumbest commentary I have ever heard in a sporting event ever than it was an actual boxing event. There was musical guests as, like, Justin Bieber and fucking the Black Keys and stuff, and apparently people added it up, and I knew it felt like this when I was watching it last night. People added it up. It was like 3 hours of a fucking musical event and maybe like 2 hours, an hour and a half of fucking boxing. And like the whole event was just a complete circus. They had Snoop Dogg on commentary, and don't get me wrong, I like Uncle Snoop. He's a great personality. He makes great tunes, man. He's a great marketable person when it comes to cannabis products and stuff. But he was just complete ass on the mic last night. Everybody was. I get it. It's not supposed to be a professional boxing event. But, you know, when you're coming from UFC and you have, like, the most analytical commentators in the game, and then you go from that to Triller Boxing, which had Snoop Dogg, Pete Davidson, Mario Lopez, and, like, 2 other people on the, like, in the fucking booth. None of them have ever boxed before. Mario Lopez is probably the only one that has any martial arts experience, and that's because he trains it. He's never stepped in a cage. He's never boxed in his life. Like, it was just complete ass. Commentators are not supposed to be biased. They're supposed to, like, color commentators are supposed to be guys who explain the action and just kind of make jokes throughout the fight, but like, the absolute biasism showed from Snoop Dogg, and he was just complete fucking ass on the mic. And then Pete Davidson was no better, feeding off of Snoop Dogg. So the whole event was just, like I said, a complete fucking circus. And it should have never happened. But that being said, that brings us into the main event. Ben Askren versus Jake Paul. So before I get into what actually happened in the fight, let me just lay the scene out for you, okay? So in one corner, the red corner, we got a 23-year-old. He's my age, so he's like a little bit maybe younger or maybe older than me. Like a couple months younger or older, I don't remember, but he's my age. He's like 6 feet tall, 190 pounds, took his training fucking seriously, but has only been boxing for 3 years, I believe now. He's had one fight each year. He's had one in 2018. He's had one in 2019. I believe 2020 is the only one he didn't have a fight in, and that was because they were gonna have the fight, but it, you know, the deal ended up happening like in 2021, I guess. But anyway, so we have this guy, a young, in his prime, athletic kid who's taking his boxing seriously, up against an Olympic wrestler who is now going down the hill of his prime. He's got a metal hip. He's got no actual hip. And he was never known for his striking prowess to begin with. He has had the most ass striking. Let me put this in perspective for you. He has gone up against some great strikers and he's handled a punch. So that'll come into play. Like, remember, kids, take notes. There's going to be a test. So him taking these shots is going to come into play later when I talk about the main event. But anyway, he has never been known to be a striker. He even got outstruck by the UFC's weakest striker in Damian Maia. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying Damian Maia is a shitty fighter, because where he lacks in striking, he's like Ben Askren. He's got the grip strength of a fucking gorilla. So, anyway, Ben Askren's never been known to be a striker, right? He's never had the best striking. He has fast hands, but not fluent, not precise. They're pillow hands. Like they're literally it's the worst technique you've ever seen. And Jake Paul calls this guy out, right? We got Jake Paul, who's been training with boxers for 3 years now and has been taking his fighting seriously, almost 4 years, because I believe he started training in the beginning of 2018 for his Deji fight, and yeah, it's 2021, so about 4 years he's been training boxing full-time, essentially. And then we got Ben, who's coming straight out of retirement with a metal hip and probably maybe 2 months of training and coming in with a dad bod. And Jake Paul is just going about saying that this is going to prove that he's an actual fighter, and that Ben Askren fucking represents the MMA community. No, none of that. None of that is even remotely true. So, let's get into it. Obviously, we're just going to get into the weigh-ins. Throughout the entire lead-up, Ben Askren just kind of played this role of he never took it seriously. Now, I kind of thought, as a competitor, he'd come in and take the actual fight seriously, but coming to the lead-up, he was clowning Jake Paul because he just did not take a single fucking thing seriously. He made Jake Paul look like a complete asshat. It was hilarious. Anyway, that's beyond the point. Coming in the weigh-in, same thing. Jake Paul's looking fucking shredded, and Ben Askren comes in with the daddiest dad bod I have ever fucking seen. Like, it's flab upon flab upon flab. And as soon as I saw that, I was like, uh-oh. But I still had hope. So anyway, let's just put something out there before I explain what happened in the main event. Triller is Jake Paul's promotion. Triller assigns the referees and the judges. Triller assigns the commentators. And listen to this because it's going to count. This shows. So going into the fight, first of all, Pete Davidson made everybody feel uncomfortable when they were announcing the fighters and stuff by just completely saying he's about to come live on broadcast. But that's not why I'm going to complain, because Pete Davidson's shit isn't, him being fucking weird, right? So I'm not going to complain about Pete Davidson being weird. More so Pete Davidson being ass and just feeding off of Snoop. Snoop, on the other hand, he was biased. Like I said before, color commentators aren't supposed to be biased. They're supposed to be neutral. Deep down they can have a bias, but they're not supposed to show their bias. It's like a ref showing their bias. They've clearly been paid off, right? It's not good. It doesn't look good. Anyway, so going into it, Snoop is fucking like cheering for Jake Paul, hyping him up, saying, yo, get me the money, Jake, shit like that, because he made a bet on Jake, which I don't think that should be allowed. That's like the ref making a bet on Jake. But anyway, so the fight starts, and immediately, man, Ben with his hands up just looks so weird and stiff, and I was like, oh man, but I had high hopes. They were dancing around for a bit, trading jabs. Ben was doing a good job backing up whenever Jake would throw a hook, but eventually it was like 1 minute into the fight, Jake threw like an overhand hook, like either a right hook or it looked more like an overhand, and he clipped Ben. And I'm gonna admit this, even though what I'm about to say is probably the most likely thing ever, because I'm about to say it. Ben Askren took a fucking dive, but I don't think he was actually taking a dive. I think more so the ref was paid off. But anyway, my opinion on the fight is the fight was rigged. But I'm going to do something that no other MMA fan, no other combat sports fan has been doing to Jake Paul, other than maybe like a few publications I've seen. He hit Ben flush with a nice overhand. So even though Ben was okay after getting up and recovering, he still hit Ben hard. So like for people thinking that Ben himself took a dive and like overacted and shit, he didn't, because he got hit flush by an amazing punch, and clearly Jake Paul has power on him. So obviously that knocked Ben down, and it probably hurt Ben. And like I said, I'm going to give credit where credit is due. He probably hurt Ben with that hook. But Ben recovered, and I'll tell you why. He got up after, and yes, he stumbled a little bit against the ropes, but after he got up, he started, like, he was straight back up, like, his posture was straight up again, and he was walking forward towards Jake, ready to do it again, but the ref pushed him back and said, no, wait, and kept counting, and then counted to 10, and counted the fight off. I think, like, a lot of people are saying that Ben took a dive specifically. I don't think Ben took a dive. I just think Ben didn't fucking care that the ref was paid off, because that's what I believe. I think the referee was rigged, because obviously they assigned the referee, and obviously he was like, okay, I'm going to go at the first sign of him being knocked down, and it looked like a pretty bad knockdown, so it was a perfect fucking chance. But Ben, I don't think he took a dive specifically. I think he just was smiling afterwards, because he knew, he's like, I just got an easy payday, man. Like, yeah, I could have probably went more with that kid, but I just got an easy payday either way. Like, I'm going to go home tomorrow with my hot-ass wife and my beautiful children, and I'm going to be like $1 million richer, $500,000 richer. Obviously, he's probably going to get more because of pay-per-view points, but, like, so I'm pretty sure this fight was rigged. Nonetheless, it was just a complete circus. I'm glad I didn't pay for it, and I'm going to admit that. I'm going to wholeheartedly admit that. I don't do that for UFC events. Like, I don't admit that for UFC events, but fuck Triller. Yes, I illegally watched it, because fuck paying $50 for that absolute shit show and circus when I could watch it for free. And apparently, their fucking security team and, like, their legal team or whatever was so trash that they had YouTube streams that were streaming the entire event for free. Some people even using the fights as a way to gain more subs. They would close the fights and say, okay, I'm not putting it back on until you get me this amount of subs. There was other people just straight up, like, making a lie out of their fucking stream by saying, like, yeah, my streaming for my Nan's toaster, $5 or whatever. Then it was literally the thumbnail of a toaster, but it was the actual fights. So I'm very curious to see how much they actually sold, considering they raised the price to $50 and how much of a fucking circus the fight was to begin with. But anyway, my final thoughts. Ben Askren did not take a dive, but Ben Askren was not mad at the easy payday. I believe the ref was paid off. The fight was rigged. Jake Paul hit him with a good punch. That's all. So, now that that's over with, we're actually going to get into the real fighters, because there was a UFC card last night, and two absolute bomb middleweights went at it in the main event. My favorite middleweight, Robert Whittaker, and, a pretty decent middleweight in his own right, Kelvin Gastelum. So, that's going to be nice to talk about, but that wasn't the only thing. Before I get into it, the card had not only that, but in the co-main event, they had Andrei Arlovsky and Chase Sermon, but that wasn't originally supposed to be the co-main event. It was actually a lightweight bout between Jeremy Stephens and Drakkar Klose, but at the weigh-ins, they were at face-offs, and Jeremy Stephens pushed Drakkar Klose, and Drakkar Klose had a case of bitch boy neck and got whiplash, essentially, is what it was explained as medically. And he was suffering concussion-like symptoms because of it, and he had to pull out of his fight, which was really unfortunate. It happened as the event started, so it was really unfortunate. Fuck my whole DraftKings pool up. But anyway, I'm not going to complain about my DraftKings pool. Not only that, but we also had a fight between Abdul Razak Al Hassan and Jacob Malkoun, and then Tracy Cortez and Justine Kish. And then to open up the main card, we had one of my favorite lightweights, and I hope to get him on the show soon, Violent Bob Ross, Luis Pena, up against, what was his name? Alexander Munoz, I believe. Uriah Faber's wrestling coach guy. Anyway, so we'll get into that card, and I'm going to start off with the Luis Pena fight, obviously, as we always do, because we go from the beginning of the main card all the way to the main event. And boy, howdy. Boy howdy was this fight fun. I knew going into this that this fight was going to be fireworks because Luis Pena, no matter what fight it is, he's always looking for violence and he's always looking for a finish. And sometimes he gets, taken down and that stand up is nullified. And he's got pretty good ground game skills as well. And I was expecting that with this fight, but at the same time, I was expecting fireworks, and that's exactly what we got. We had a little bit of ground game here and there. Alex Munoz doing a good job, mixing in his striking with his takedowns and just constantly keeping Luis Pena guessing. But Luis Pena was constantly on the back foot, using his, fucking huge-ass reach advantage, because the guy is 6'3" and has, 80 inches of reach, just piecing him up, throwing combos, and it was a really close fight. Both guys were trading shots, and just... it was loud, you could hear the shots, and it was throughout all 3 rounds that these guys were just fucking battling. It was so fun to watch. I wouldn't have been surprised if they got fight of the night, but obviously we had some better fights throughout the entire night, and I'll get into them in a bit. But round 1, Luis Pena did a good job despite fighting off the back foot for a little bit at the beginning of the first, but he started to get his footing, and I believe he managed to edge out the round and piece Munoz up, but then going into the second, Munoz did exactly what I explained he did earlier. He mixed his strikings with his takedowns. He actually kept Luis Pena guessing because it's mixed martial arts, and did exactly what you would expect from a wrestling coach, and took Luis Pena down. But Luis Pena did a good job at dragging it towards the fence and constantly fighting his hips and pushing the head the opposite way, and just making it hard for Alexander Munoz to just transition and use the cage to get back up to his feet, and then he reversed on the cage, so he was doing a good job of that. I thought Alex Munoz particularly won that round because of that, but going into the third, Luis Pena did a good job at fighting on his back foot and using his reach and just watching out for those takedowns, and both guys were just trading shots. Alex Munoz had some good shots, some good 1-2s that actually looked like they wobbled Luis Pena. It was just a fun fight altogether, man. And I was so happy to talk about it today because, 1, I was happy that he was opening up the main card because I love Luis Pena, and 2, it was just an all-around fun fight. Alex Munoz brought the fucking heat, and Luis Pena just stood there and was like, yeah, you want the heat? I'll eat all the heat. And I was like, yeah, I'm fucking here for this. So yeah, it was all hype, and it was a great fight. But then it all stopped because we had the queen of the fat asses, Tracy Cortez, coming in next. Oh, by the way, Luis Pena won. I believe it was 29-28 on all judges' scorecards, I believe. Or maybe it was a split decision. But the next fight was I believe a flyweight fight between Tracy Cortez, who's got the fattest ass in the UFC, and Justine Kish. And man, was this a fucking fun fight. I didn't expect this because Tracy Cortez is a ground artist, and Justine Kish is a Muay Thai artist, a karate kickboxer. She's a striker, essentially, is what I'm trying to get at. And man, she was beaten up on Tracy Cortez, but Tracy Cortez was not giving up, using her fucking grappling to her advantage, and would constantly throw her to the ground, and at one point, was hanging off of her, I guess. I remember that. That was weird. But Tracy Cortez did a great job at just mixing up her strikes, and every time the striking would be too much for her on the feet, she would take it to the ground and smother Justine Kish on the fucking ground, and just didn't really do much in the way of submissions and takedowns. Just every now and then would use those takedowns, and when it was on the ground, she'd make it difficult for Justine Kish to get back up. But Tracy Cortez actually obliged Justine and stayed on the feet and struck with Justine. And even though it was really close, and I thought that it was going to be a split decision because I thought that Justine Kish won at least round 2. Unfortunately, for my prediction, that's not what it was, but it was actually, it was a weird split decision, and we've been seeing these a lot lately, where it's 29-28 for a fighter, 29-28 for another fighter, and then 30-27 out of the fucking blue for the winner. And that's exactly what happened. Tracy Cortez won by split decision via 29-28, 28-29, and then 30-27, which when I heard that get read out, I was like, what? 30-27? What the fuck? Like, yeah, okay. I can see how you see that Tracy Cortez won, but 30-27, how'd she win all 3 rounds if it was a split decision? Like, one judge thought, okay, 2 judges were on the same page because it was close. It was 2-1 on both judges' scorecards, just for a different fighter. And then on the other judge's scorecard, it was 3-0. Like, it just didn't make any sense. It was, like I said, it was fucking weird. I was like, what the fuck, man? Like, what are these judges smoking? And like I said, like I just said, we've been seeing a lot of these. Every time there's a fucking decision, it's like 29-28, 29-28, 30-27, it's okay, whatever. But then it goes like split decision. It's like, okay, one judge has it 29-28, and then another judge has it 29-27, and then another judge has it 30-26, and it's like, what the fuck happened? What fight were you watching? It was just weird when I heard it get read out. But that was the second fight of the night. And then the third fight of the night, we had an Aussie, a fellow Aussie middleweight, in a Jacob Malkoun, going up against Abdul Razak Al Hassan, who actually was making his middleweight debut. His last 2 fights were at welterweight, where, you know, at welterweight, he's showcased that he's got some power. But the problem is, even though he's got that power that can put anybody out in the matter of a second, he also lacks cardio and gasses his arms out really fast. And that's exactly what happened. And that's exactly why I'm not going to talk much about this fight, because it was really one-sided from start to finish. Round 1 to round 3 was Jacob Malkoun taking him down, smothering him on the ground, constantly throwing him to the ground whenever they were on the feet, every now and then trading shots, but then use those shots to keep him guessing for the shots and then throw the takedown when he's not expecting it. And it was just a ground game affair where, don't get me wrong, it's not one of these like boring wrestle fucks. On the ground, he was threatening chokes, threatening fucking arm bars, and my favorite, he was throwing short elbows and stuff every time he would transition to side control. A very the move of the fight for him that he kept going to was like he would get a guillotine and then it would move into a Darce choke, and as Abdul Razak Al Hassan is like transitioning, he would transition with him, and it would go from a Darce choke to him going to side control, and he'd go back to throwing short elbows, and then Abdul Razak Al Hassan would go on to all fours again, prompting Jacob Malkoun to get into the guillotine again, which would get fucking Abdul to roll on his back again, turning it into a Darce choke, and then he'd start transitioning into fucking Jacob Malkoun so the Darce choke doesn't get tight. And then all of a sudden, Jacob Malkoun just fucking transitions back to side control, and it did it over and over and over again. I could probably count at least 4 different times that the guy did it. It was funny, but that was the part that I actually enjoyed about it, despite it being more so a wrestle fuck fest. It wasn't boring. It was constant scrambling on the ground. He was throwing shots. He was constantly keeping Abdul Razak Al Hassan in trouble. And it was just really fun to see a showcase of wrestling where it was constantly offensive. It wasn't just a guy smothering people like we've seen the last 2 fucking events with, obviously, both Kevin Holland events. But anyway, yeah, we got a little treat in that with wrestling, because it was a bunch of just offensive wrestling, and obviously Robert Whittaker's teammate, so it was kind of like is this a peer into what we're going to see tonight, like in the main event? But anyway, that leaves us with the impromptu co-main event of the evening. And that means, so the impromptu co-main event of the evening was Andrei Arlovsky, a veteran in his own right. He made his debut at UFC 29. He's been fighting for more than 20 years at this point. The man has got the flattest nose on earth because it's seen more combat than a Vietnam veteran. And it's just, Jesus Christ, it's incredible how quick of a turnaround this man has made, because Andrei Arlovsky just came off of a fight against, who was it now? it's a heavyweight, and I can't remember the fucking name right now, but he's a Canadian, and he came off of a very close decision against him and won. And then that was, I believe, like near the end of February, and here we are, mid-April now, so about a month and a half later, and he's already fighting another dude in the co-main event. And Chase Sherman, who's no slouch, he's a young guy, former linebacker in college football, and I don't think I've talked about him before on the podcast, but I enjoy his fights. I've been a fan of his fights for a while. He's been in and out of the UFC. He's kind of had a lackluster career, but honestly, despite that, these two guys did not disappoint. I don't think there was a single moment that was on the ground. Unless somebody slipped and fell on their ass, there was no moment that got to the ground. No takedowns, no ground game. It was a complete striking affair of just kickboxing and both guys just closing off the cage to each other, pushing each other against the cage, and that was literally it. And they were just throwing bombs. Chase Sherman, halfway through the first, or very close to the end of the first, caught Arlovsky with a right hand that wobbled him, and as Arlovsky's backing up against the fence trying to cover up, Chase Sherman's just throwing a flurry, just constantly hitting him with more shots, and I thought like the fight was going to be put to a stop there because Andrei Arlovsky was out on his feet just trying to get out of the way of these punches, but the ref gave him enough time. Andrei Arlovsky, being the veteran he is, I believe, rushed him into a clinch and reversed it against the cage, so he had him against the cage and then backed up and got out of the way and recovered, which was very smart of him. But he almost got finished by Chase Sherman, and then all of a sudden, near the end of the very first round after that, Chase Sherman gets caught with a nice right hand from Andrei Arlovsky, and then the round ends. And it was obviously, I believe, 10-9 Sherman, in my opinion, for that round. But then the next round, Andrei Arlovsky just started getting his footing. It was like he was getting in his groove, and it was really nice to see because, obviously, it's just really nice to see these older veterans still be able to compete with these guys. And the heavyweight division has seen that a lot lately because, I'm going to be honest with you, despite Francis Ngannou being the champion of the division, it's a very, very shallow division. And it looks like it requires very little skill to be a heavyweight in the UFC division. And that's not me talking shit about Francis Ngannou. The man is still fucking dangerous and could probably punch a car as it's driving at him at full speed, but that's besides the point. The heavyweight division has just been looking a little lackluster, so veterans like these have been able to kind of stay in their groove and have been able to retire later in their careers, and Andrei Arlovsky is no different. He just was getting to his groove and started landing these leg kicks that eventually one of them landed, and it clearly hurt Chase Sherman. Like, his leg stiffened up, he stopped for a moment and then started like kind of walking on his leg again. And then a little bit after taking a couple of those leg kicks, you could actually see on the camera his calf was like red, and he was just, it looked like he was fucking hurting to plant on it. So he would lunge forward with his back leg and just throw flurries instead of throwing actual power shots, which would allow him to get caught, which was very unfortunate for him. But it was just a fun second round. Arlovsky did a great job at just utilizing those leg kicks to slow him down and just throwing the, fighting the back foot as Chase Sherman, desperately, lunges forward. It was just a great round for Arlovsky. So 10-9 Arlovsky. It was 1-1 going into the third. And the reason why I say that it looked like Chase Sherman was hurting because he was planting on his leg is because going back to their corner, Chase Sherman actually said that he was hurting, that he could not plant on his leg to throw a power shot. So that's kind of how I got that little tidbit, because he gave it away to his corner. But Andrei Arlovsky also noticed this because one of the leg kicks, I believe, he like lifted his leg a bit and it showed that it actually hurt him. Like, it actually fucking affected him. So Arlovsky going into the third round just continued that entire plan, just throwing leg kicks and just throwing jabs as he's fighting on the back foot. But the funny thing was, he was fighting more on the back foot in the third round. It was like he was just doing, he was just on his bicycle the whole time going backwards. Literally just walking backwards the whole time as Chase Sherman was just walking him down, eating the shots, and that's why Arlovsky won the third round, because Arlovsky was throwing every time Chase Sherman would come forward, but Arlovsky was also backing up. He was staying constantly on the back foot, so he was just constantly throwing shots while staying on the back foot, and Chase Sherman had to, walk him down, and he wasn't able to throw as much shots. Arlovsky kind of hit Chase with a nice shot and hurt him a little bit, but all in all, no guy got dropped, and it was just a fun striking battle between two big guys. Something that you don't really get to see with the heavyweights because most heavyweights get completely tired by the third round, so they're just hugging each other, trying to like save their energy. But these guys, despite being tired, were just throwing the whole time. Made it really fun, and it made it incredibly awesome to just lead in to our main event because my god, this main event was so fun to watch, and Robert Whittaker just put on a complete masterclass. Like, that is all I can really explain it as. That's all the commentators were explaining it as last night. That's all the fans were explaining it as last night. It was just a complete masterclass of skill from Robert Whittaker. A complete improvement from when he got knocked out from Adesanya. And that's what I love about this is the last 3 fights that Whittaker has had. It has shown that he has improved so fucking much since being knocked out by Adesanya. But anyway, we will get into that fight because, my god, the absolute performance that Whittaker showed just had me absolutely pumped. Alright, so, getting into this main event, man. Like I said, Jesus Christ. Robert Whittaker just putting on a masterclass of all skills. Going into the first round, both guys coming out, Gastelum actually coming out swinging, which was surprising to me. I know he's been very much in love with his boxing, but him coming out swinging like that was a little surprising. He caught Robert Whittaker. I thought it hurt him, but Whittaker has a chin of fucking granite. And then Whittaker started lunging in with his punches and caught Gastelum, so that kind of got Gastelum a little fucking cautious. And both guys were just throwing jabs, trying to like feel each other out. And then Whittaker threw this nice like 1-2 and then right head kick combo that he always does. And I love it because it looks so fucking it's fluent. It's nice in the way that it's fluent, but it's weird. It's ugly looking in the way that it's weird, and I love it because it's so unorthodox how he does it. He like comes in, throws the 1-2 real quick, and then throws the right head kick right after, because you'd be expecting an uppercut or you'd be expecting him to put up his hands to defend, but all of a sudden a fucking foot or a shin just comes and smacks you right in the side of the head. And that's exactly what happened to Kelvin Gastelum, because Gastelum was like, oh shit, I better defend this. And he started defending the 1-2 and was ready to throw a strike because he thought Whittaker would keep his hands down because he's about to put him back up. All of a sudden the head kick comes and just nicks Gastelum. Gastelum's hurt and wobbling. And Whittaker tries to rush him down, but Whittaker actually took it very patiently, and Gastelum recovered very quickly as well. And then, obviously, for the rest of the fight, it was just, or for the rest of the first round anyway, it was just Whittaker walking Gastelum down and throwing strikes every now and then. And then in the second round was when Whittaker really started to get his groove, because Gastelum got some good shots on Whittaker, and every time Whittaker would go in to throw shots, Gastelum would trade 1 or 2, but Whittaker just kept hitting that 1-2 combo with the head kick every now and then, and just kept walking Gastelum down and keep him guessing with strikes. And honestly, even though Whittaker was doing the good job, I have to give a lot of props to Gastelum, man, because Gastelum fucking was in there, ate every shot that Whittaker had to give, and my god, man, he just kept coming, kept walking forward, did not back up. It was every now and then Whittaker would push him back, but it was mostly Gastelum just walking forward and eating these shots, and every now and then trading a few of his own. And it just showed how much heart Gastelum had. But honestly, man, we knew that to begin with. The man went 5 rounds with Israel Adesanya and almost beat him, actually. Like, almost finished him. It was insane. Like, I actually love that fight. I still go back and watch that event in full because that was also the Poirier versus Holloway fight. But anyway, yeah, Whittaker started walking him down even more in the third, and then near the end of the third, he lands a takedown, which was great because at that point, Gastelum was for the most part expecting his Whittaker's boxing and every now and then a head kick or two, but he wasn't exactly expecting a takedown. So Whittaker would throw the takedown, transition, throw some shots, keep him down there, and then get back. Like when they get back up to his feet, he'd start striking again. And then in round 4, he did it again. He kept getting these takedowns every now and then after striking with Gastelum for a few minutes. And the entrance of the takedowns were perfect. They were perfect double legs under the hip that were quick as hell. You wouldn't see them coming right away. And by the time Gastelum had time to defend it, it was too late. Like, Gastelum was already on his ass on the floor, going towards the cage if that was the only thing he could do. It was just a great skill set from Whittaker. Whittaker actually showed how how much he's improved against Gastelum, and maybe, just maybe, even if Whittaker had not improved the way he did, maybe that would have been the outcome of the Gastelum fight. But regardless, Whittaker showed a complete masterclass of all skills, because even round 5 he did the same thing. He was boxing Gastelum up and then using takedowns to keep Gastelum guessing, and won a complete 5-0 shutout over Kelvin Gastelum in the main event, winning the title shot, in my opinion, because a lot of people were saying last night, asking the question, do you guys agree with Izzy versus Robert Whittaker? And I have to say, man, I do. I believe that, it would be a slightly different fight this time around, honestly. I think that Whittaker would use his takedowns a lot more, would not lunge in carelessly like he did last time, because he didn't do that much this time around, and he hasn't been the last couple fights. He's been doing a good job picking the moments when he goes in with his hooks. He's been mixing them up very well. He looks like a much more improved fighter, and I really enjoy watching him fight, especially recently with the last couple fights he's had. But that being said, I agree with everybody else saying that he deserves the next title shot against Izzy, because Izzy's out here. Everybody thinks Izzy cleared out the division. He only cleared out a couple people in the division. Whittaker's over here clearing out all the top contenders, so he's the only contender. So I don't see it any other way. I think Adesanya needs to give him that rematch. Whether which way it'll go, that's a different story. I don't know which way it'll go. Part of me thinks that Whittaker might actually use his takedowns, because I feel like Blachowicz kind of etched a game plan for people to beat Adesanya, but that's besides the point. I'm just going to say that I agree that the fight should happen. Anyway, that's it for this event, because that was the main event. I think that Adesanya should give Whittaker the rematch, and that's all. That's it. That's all there is to it. Once again, to end things off, to end the podcast off, we will be talking about the UFC 261 title fights. I want to talk about them real quick, starting with the flyweight bout between Valentina Shevchenko and Jessica Andrade. I said it last week on the podcast. Andrade may very well be the only chance that the flyweight division has to dethroning Valentina Shevchenko. But the thing is, it's still not going to be an easy task, no matter how powerful Jessica Andrade is and how deadly she is, because even though Jessica Andrade has that power to just put Valentina out on her ass with one shot, or to dunk Valentina on her head and knock her out, Valentina's still precise and intelligent. Like, she's got the fight IQ of a fucking, mathematician. She is just a genius when it comes to fight IQ, and I feel like she's just leagues ahead of everybody else. But I do think that this is going to be a competitive fight. I do think it can go both ways, and it's going to be a fun fight regardless. I don't think I'm going to see a lot of takedowns from Shevchenko, more so Andrade, because Shevchenko is going to use her striking, obviously. She's got the reach advantage in this one, because Andrade's only 5'1". She's my height. And I think Andrade's going to try to close the pocket and try to keep Shevchenko's distance out of play. And I feel like we're going to see a slam coming. Like, Andrade's going to try to use takedowns and use her little fucking buff power body. And I think that's how it's going to go. But whether who's going to win or not, I can't exactly give you that. I think that if it's going to do anything, she needs to knock Shevchenko out, or I think Shevchenko's going to win by decision. But that's not the only women's fight on the card. In the co-main event, we have a strawweight championship fight between Weili Zhang and Rose Namajunas. And there's some controversy leading up to that fight because Rose Namajunas has said some controversial things about Weili Zhang's country. And I'm not a person who enjoys communism, for the record. And that was kind of what Rose's comments were surrounding, was communism. But everybody's angry at how Rose kind of generalized Weili as a just altogether a communism supporter, like a CCP supporter, not realizing that she may not be pro-government, but she can't exactly be outspoken against the government because of how people that are outspoken against the government are treated there, including social credit and everything. So a lot of people were very much angry at Rose for saying those things. I get what she means, like her Lithuanian heritage has had battles with communist Russia, but for her to just generalize Weili as all Chinese people as a communist, it was just pretty fucking mean, pretty dirty in my opinion. So a lot of people are wanting Rose to get smashed, and me included. So I think my prediction is going to be Weili Zhang by TKO, maybe round 3 or maybe even round 1. But I feel like Weili is going to come into this a lot more heated now, a lot more violent, and I feel like a finish is coming on. So that's going to happen. But to end off the main card, the main event is the fight that I didn't think should have happened. So I'm just going to give my prediction now. The fight is Jorge Masvidal challenging Kamaru Usman for Kamaru Usman's belt again. And I'm just going to say it right now. I feel like it's going to be a little bit more competitive this time. Jorge might win one round, but I feel we're just going to have a repeat of UFC 251 where Usman just used his wrestling to take Jorge down and used his grappling to just keep Jorge against the fence and just foot stomped his poor toes to oblivion. And I feel like that's exactly what's going to happen again. I don't see Kamaru wanting to strike with Jorge at all. And I just don't see what Jorge can do differently in this time around that he wasn't going to do then. Like, I get it. People were saying, oh, he had 6 days notice. That's bullshit because regardless, you have to admit that when Jorge was just training casually, he was preparing for an Usman matchup because he was dead set on getting that title shot. So 6 days notice or not, I don't know what Jorge can do differently. So honestly, my prediction, Usman by unanimous decision. He's going to defend his title. He's going to make Jorge look absolutely useless like the journeyman he is. And it'll be time to bring somebody who actually can challenge Kamaru for his throne. Like, I don't know, Leon Edwards or something. Bring somebody in. But anyway, those are my predictions for the 3 title fights on the card. I told you guys this was going to be a little bit of a shorter podcast because, you know, there wasn't really much to talk about in terms of news. Just more so the Ben Askren event and the UFC event that just happened and the Conor Poirier bullshit. So anyway, I will see you guys in the next episode. I hope you guys had an awesome week. I hope you guys enjoyed the events. I know I enjoyed the UFC event at least. And I hope you guys have an incredible week incoming. And I hope you guys enjoy the pay-per-view. I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace out, guys.
You've been listening to the Dillo's Dojo podcast. Keep in touch with Dillo on his social media at Dillo Ross on Twitter and Dillo Ross on Instagram.